We are one people.
Somos povo.
Somos un pueblo.
Nous sommes unis.
We are one people praying,
Orando. Pour prier.
Orando.
giving,
Doando.
Ofrendando.
Pour donner.
building,
Construindo.
Construyendo.
Pour construire.
and engaging all ages with the good news of Jesus.
E envolvendo todas as idades com as boas novas de Jesus.
Y conectando a todas las generaciones con las buenas nuevas de Jesús.
Et mobiliser chaque génération pour la bonne nouvelle de Jésus.
We are Nazarene Missions International.
Missões Nazarenos Internacionais.
Somos Misiones Nazarenas Internacionales.
Nous sommes la Mission Nazaréenne Internationale.
Around the world. Believers are depending upon Crosspoint, praying for them. They need you to continue to pray for them. In this last year, the Church of the Nazarene entered 3 new countries. We now are officially registered in Singapore, Mongolia, and Curacao. You heard of Curacao? It's one of the ABC Islands. Does that help? No. All right. Well, the ABC Islands are off the coast of Venezuela. Perhaps you've heard of some of the others: Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. They're just north of Venezuela. And the Church of the Nazarene is now officially entered in Curacao. And the story of how that happened is fascinating. You see, Curacao is a Dutch island, and it was extremely expensive to send missionaries into Curacao. But so the church reached out to Nazarenes in the Netherlands, and they said, is there any chance that there's anyone here from the Netherlands who happens to have connections in Curacao? And it just so happened that Jonathan Lisette had moved there. That Jonathan works in IT, got tired of the weather. He thought the weather in Curacao would be better than the Netherlands. Don't understand that, do you? Anyway, he thought the weather would be better, and so they moved there, and they are officially planting the Church of the Nazarene there in Curacao. Will you pray for them? Will you pray for the other believers around the world who are depending upon you? It's so easy because we here in the United States, we really don't think about what it means, because the truth is I can believe anything I want to here in the United States, but that's not true around the world. And so believers are depending upon you to pray for them. And we're depending on Crosspoint to help. But because of your investment, as your pastor shared, in giving so that others can know, last year in the Church of the Nazarene, every hour of every day, 25 people someplace in the world found Jesus. So those are the returns on your investment. Great things are happening in the Church of the Nazarene around the world because of your participation. God is raising up leaders all across the nations. And people are raising their hands. I know in one particular continent, I was recently there visiting the people, and there were all these different places. They had a map, and they said all these different places they want to go. And they weren't waiting for the church to officially send them. They're just going because God has called. So great things are happening because of your investment. So thank you for what you are doing. Their names were Oscar and Marjorie, and they were a young couple, and they believed that God wanted them to be missionaries. And so they applied to the Church of the Nazarene to become missionaries. And the church agreed, and the church sent them to Africa. At that time, they didn't even tell them which country. They simply said Africa. Now, here's a funny story. You know, Africa is a continent. It's not a country. People sometimes get confused, and they think they're going to go to Africa, the country. No, it's a continent. So they were sent to Africa, the continent, and eventually they were assigned to Portuguese East Africa, which is now called Mozambique. The journey to get to Africa in those times was really arduous. It was before planes, and so they actually got on a ship in New York. And 3 days after they began the journey, their little girl, Beth, turned 1. It was a long journey. Men slept in hammocks, and the women slept with children on the other part. It took them weeks just to get to Italy, then to Egypt, then down to Kenya, Tanzania, and eventually to South Africa. When they first served, they went for 8 years before they came back to the United States. Can you imagine that today? Before the days of the internet, before cell phones and text messages, what would it have been like? They suffered real hardship, real loss. It was difficult, but God called and God sustained, and they were faithful. And so they went, and the church grew, and the great things started to happen. At one point, when they were at home after serving for a long time, they got a letter from headquarters asking if they would consider transferring to a different part of the country, 1,000 miles further north. And it was a far more rustic than where they were already, which was pretty rustic. And they didn't want to go because they didn't really have roads, and the Civil War was beginning, and it was just simply going to be a difficult time to go. You see, the Civil War was really, really bad. They were coming into villages, and they would kill the chief, and they would maim the children, and they planted mines everywhere. Their intent was to plant fear. And they were being fairly successful at it. Oscar and Marjorie prayed about it, and while they didn't want to go, they agreed to go because they thought that's what God wanted them to do. Have you ever done that? Do something that doesn't make sense because God wants you to do it? So they went, and God helped. With their son Sam, he had been away at boarding school, and he came home for 3 months before he was going to come to the States to go to college. And so Sam decided he wanted a big project to work on in those 3 months. Now today, the big project would be the internet and video games, but that wasn't an option then. So Sam decided that there was this ginormous, and I mean ginormous, boulder that was there. And Sam decided that he was going to remove that boulder. Now, he didn't have any equipment, he didn't have any money. So his first thought was dynamite. Makes sense, right? Would that not have been awesome? Drill some holes, put some dynamite in, and kaboom. That'd be so, so cool. I mean, I'd really like to do that myself. But the problem was he couldn't control the explosion, and it was too close. That boulder was too close to other buildings. And so those little pieces of rock would have destroyed the other buildings. So dynamite was ruled out. His next thought was fire. And that's the one he settled on. So he'd go out into the woods, and he'd put all these huge piles of wood on top of this huge boulder, and he'd light the fire. And the fire was so intense that it would actually bubble the paint in these buildings next door. And so, but amazingly, time after time, as the fire would start to die down, the rain would come, put out the fire, and cool the rock to help it to break and crack. Eventually, it took him 2 months of working on that, and eventually the rock was removed. Big project. I guess he got his wish. A few months later, Oscar and Marjorie had a full Sunday. They had had lots of church services and activities, and they were coming home. Where they lived was at the top of this mountain, but to get there was really hard because, you see, the road was not really a road, and it was just wide enough for a car, and you had to use four-wheel drive, and if you looked a little bit to the left, you were going to fall off the mountain. It was pretty rustic. So as they're coming up the road, they see a man up ahead, and they saw that he had a rifle in his hand and something else in his other hand. But there was nowhere to turn around. There was nothing they could do but to continue on and to hope for the best. But as they got closer in the moonlight, they see that his intent was not good. But they continued. As they got close to him, suddenly there was a loud kaboom, and the glass on the driver's side door shattered. The glass came and cut Oscar. Blood started to come down his face. They had nothing they could do but continue on. Marjorie said she began to pray. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm in a situation like that, my prayers are not deep theological thoughts. Are yours? They amount to things like, help. God, help. They went up the hill in four-wheel drive as fast as they could. They had no other option but to turn around and to come back down where they had just been. Now, to turn around, remember I just told you there's no place to turn around except for that spot where the boulder had been. So they came up the hill without slowing down, a rapid U-turn around that spot where their son had removed the boulder a few months before. And they came back down. They looked for the individual. They didn't know where he was. And all of a sudden, in through that open window, that broken window now, came the gun, past Oscar's stomach, passed over to Marjorie. And Oscar shouted at her, and he said, "Grab it. The Lord is giving us his weapon." So Marjorie grabbed the gun, and they continued 20 miles down the hill, tooting their horn, looking for help, looking for someone to help them in this situation. They came back 2 days later with the military and were able to get what they could out of their home, and everything else was left. The Civil War was vicious in Mozambique. It lasted for 15 years. 1 million people were killed. Nazarene missionaries were imprisoned. Every church, every clinic, every home was confiscated. It would seem on paper to be pretty devastating, wouldn't it? But we serve an awesome God, and God's math is different than our math. And today in Mozambique, other than the United States, there's more Nazarenes in Mozambique than in any other country. Isn't that pretty cool? And in that one area where they went, where they didn't want to go, just last year, 1,400 people came to know Jesus as their personal Savior. But people like you were praying for people you don't even know, for countries you cannot pronounce, for people you've never heard of. But you see, for me, this is more than just a story. This story is actually my story. You see, my pastor every Sunday prayed for every church around the world where Jesus was proclaimed as Lord. He prayed for Nazarene missionaries, and he prayed in particular for any missionaries that our church had a relationship, and prayed for them by name. My church gave sacrificially, as your church is giving sacrificially, to support missionaries around the world. I was there in my church when Oscar and Marjorie came to visit. I was there when the letter came asking them to move to the difficult place. I was there when the letter came telling about Sam and how the rock had been removed. And I was there when the letter came from South Africa saying, "Were you praying? God protected us and we're safe." You see, I was an eyewitness to those events as I watched my church love and care for missionaries. And my heart was permanently changed as I understood that everyone living in every place, speaking every language, should know that Jesus is Lord. You see, no one should have to learn another language just to know how to spend eternity with God. They are waiting on us to tell them. And my heart was changed as I watched my church love their community and love their world. I am confident there is no one who was in my church when I was growing up who said, "Oh, she's going to become the global director of Nazarene Missions International." And you don't know who's in your church. But your faithfulness in giving, your faithfulness in praying and sending and in going is changing our world together. So Crosspoint, you have far more impact than you ever realized. Far more influence than you ever imagined. Never forget, people around the world know Jesus because of what you are doing here at Crosspoint.
Blessed are those who give without interest, who offer themselves and expect nothing in return. Hallowed are the places of small sacrifices, where the thankless work is done. Sacred are the acts of true adoration, for they reveal the heart of the divine. Envy not the givers in the crowd, earning praise for their generous deeds, for they have received their reward. But for those who give in secret, more shall be given unto them. They shall be called blessed, the true saints. The restorers of streets to dwell in, and life shall be forever theirs.
So my name is Brandon, for those of you who might not know who I am. But I have the lovely opportunity of spending lots of time with your teenagers every single week. I know it sounds horrible to some of you, but I actually really enjoy it. I think they're a really fun group, and they're really fun to to hang out with and just play games with. But I've been doing this for probably about 2 years. Since coming out of college. And guys, there's a whole wide range of vocabulary words that we are completely unaware of as a society. I just want you guys to know this. Like, it's amazing. I'm baffled. And for example, okay, my sister Mallory, she's a junior in high school, and she's in our youth group. And every single time she watches a new show on Netflix, and she'll come to a plot twist in it, and she'll come to me and she's like, "Boy, I was shook." What does shook mean? Shook. I mean, like, we think that's like physically shaking something, but I mean, no, shook means to be like caught off guard, to be surprised, you know? Okay, so one of my favorites is, do you guys know what it means to ship? Like ship, okay? It's newer. I mean, it's been around for a while, but like we think of the word ship as like a physical ship, like the Titanic, or like UPS dropping a box off of your front door. You know, that's ship. That's shipping. No, this has a whole nother dual meaning, okay? You guys aren't even there. To ship means to wish that two people would get together. Right? So I mean, like, okay, and if you guys want to get more into it, okay, you could throw in the celebrity mixed names. So like, for example, if you guys watch Friends, the entire show, you want Ross and Rachel to get together. And so you merge their name, and you say, "I ship Rachel." There you go. You guys, I don't know how this came into existence. I don't understand how this happened, what train of thought contributed to this. But I'm here to be your teenage translator and here to educate you on such important matters. But there are so many more terms out there, and I wish I could go on for them. But to me, like, we see this as so confusing and so weird. But to me, I think this shows a little light into how creative our teenagers have become over time. Just like little tiny things make them so creative right now. I know it's hard to think for a lot of us because we live with teenagers. We see teenagers, and we see that, you know what, they're so buried in their phones the whole time that they're not really spending time in the physical world. They're so worried about their social status online, who they're portrayed as online, that they don't really care about what's physically going on in the world. They seem so distracted from their own families. And that's a common thought we have of teenagers. But if you actually sit down with them, if you actually spend time with them, are able to pull them away from their phones, have a conversation with them, you're able to see these little glimpses of awesome creativity within them. A level of creativity I've never seen in like a generation. And now I'm not saying all of them are like this, okay? Not all of them are, but I mean, quite a few of them are. And in those moments, you might actually start to see potential there. And we throw that word out there a lot. We throw out that potential word with teenagers a lot. We see that they have a lot of potential to gain influence. They have a lot of potential to become successful. They have a lot of potential to be a strong leader. But my question is, we see all this potential, but we always associate teenagers by what they're going to do in the future, by what they're going to do whenever they grow up. Because ultimately what matters is what we do while we're older. In our adult lives, what we matter. That's what matters. But my question is, why do we do that? I understand that they have a lot of life ahead of them, that they have a lot of life experience to gain and a lot to learn. But yet we've done this so much that somehow we've just adapted the thought that teenagers are incapable of doing incredible things right now at their age. When digging through the Bible and going through all the Bible and so many stories, for some reason, the disciples always stick out to me. The character of who the disciples were. The disciples were the 12 people who followed Jesus closer than anybody else. And yet they stick out to me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they were so clueless half the time. Like, really, they were not a bright bunch of people. And, I mean, there were several instances where Jesus would tell some life-altering story, life-altering parable, life-altering message, and here come the disciples right afterwards asking some sort of question that has nothing to do with what he just talked about. Or they just don't say anything at all and just whoosh, over their heads. But if I could also say it like this, well, it's probably well-founded. Let me say this. It's probably well-founded. If you go through the whole list of disciples, the only one that probably had anything going for him was Matthew, because he was a tax collector. He had a real big boy job, you know. But going through the list and looking at the time they were, if you look hard into the disciples, at the time they were with Jesus, they would have been between the ages of 15 and 22 years old. They were teenagers. And now it makes sense, you know, because they were young. They don't understand, you know. They're still trying to grasp what their own identity means, you know. But yet these are the 12 people that Jesus chose, that within their teenage years, for some of them, they were going to be the ones to change the world. And so oftentimes throughout Jesus' ministry, he would tell them, he would say, I want you guys to go to this area. I want you to go to this area, and I want you to minister people, try to reach people. You know, try and gather them in, tell them the good news and everything else. And there's one instance that I find very interesting over the others. And Matthew records this. Matthew wrote this down and wrote it in the book that we know as Matthew. And this is what he says. He says this. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Jesus sends out these 12 teenagers to do the impossible. He sends out these 12 teenagers to do something that at this point in time hasn't been done by anybody except Jesus. But I think more importantly, we have to really notice where he sent them. Whenever he's looking at me, he said, I don't want you to avoid all these people from different nations. I don't want you to go to the Gentiles. I don't want you to go to the Samaritans. I want you to avoid these crew. I want you to go into the heart of Israel, into your own backyard, the people that you grew up with, the people that you've known your entire lives. I want you to go there. Yes, I know they need something. Yes, they need lots of help, and we're going to help them. But right now, I need you guys to focus on what's right here and focus on reaching the lost sheep that are right in front of us. It almost seems as though he really had to turn them in to this, which I find very intriguing. Because at this point in time, the Jewish people would have had nothing to do with either one of these groups. It was bad to look at them, let alone try and reach and save them. And so the disciples would not have thought this was normal. I mean, like, if Jesus told them to go reach people, the Samaritans and Gentiles are not their first choice. Yet he has to tell them exactly where to go. My only explanation for this is that they've probably been with Jesus long enough to realize that what Jesus' ministry was reaching out to the people outside of their circle. The only issue is that at this exact moment, he pushes them towards the circle, inside their own circle. They understand that what their mission to do is to save all of those people outside of their circle, that they lost focus of the issues and the hurt and the lost that are right here. This is one of my favorite things about Jesus. This might be getting a little deep, but he always pushed full force all these things that would contradict each other, all these things that contradict each other and are paradoxes. But he would push both of them. He would say, for example, I'm extending 100% grace to anybody I come in contact with. Everybody who meets me is loved, welcomed. I will welcome them with arms open wide. But yet at the same time, he's able in the same sentence, a lot of times, to turn around and just slap them in the face and say, what are you doing? Just slap them in the face with a bunch of truth. These things do not go together. And there's such a tension there. And we get the same tension whenever we try and focus on who we're trying to reach. Are we trying to reach those outside of Maysville? Or are we trying to reach those inside Maysville? And the answer is that both. That we're trying to reach both. Is that we are pushing both at 100%. Just recently, in Student XP, we are launching what we are calling our impact teams. And as of right now, we are setting up 4 different teams. One of them is going to focus on reaching out to teenagers that are living in West Union Children's Home right now. These teenagers have seen the worst of the worst, all the way from sexual abuse to drugs. And they've been pulled out of their homes because of it. And so I think they have 18 right now, all cramped together, living in this one house. And because of the things that they've experienced, what they've seen, all hope, they just seem so hopeless. Whatever hope they held that there was some good in this world is all gone. And we want to go there to try and restore that hope back. We want to go there and try and bring the love of Christ back to these kids' lives because we know that they desperately need it. Another one of the teams is going to be helping out with our Blessing Box ministry in town. This ministry was started up by one of our own small groups, and it has been an issue just trying to keep it stocked with food. And so we want to have our hand in that. We want to be able to help raise money. We want to be able to help raise food and be able to help stock the Blessing Box. We want to be able to help them out because it's a load that was so heavy. There's such a need for food for people who have a hard time just feeding their children. Another one of our teams is going to be focusing on disaster relief projects. Just recently, we've been hit by a lot of flooding. We want to set up a team that's going to help do projects, help reconstruct everything that was torn down by all that was ruined. and help people get back on track with their lives. And then the last team is going to focus on starting up Student XP, a youth group in Augusta. We know that coming in to that area, we want teenagers to be a big part of planning that church. And so we know that there's a huge need for a youth group of some sort, something for teenagers to do and for it to be good for them. Something for them to do and actually learn and how to make Christ a part of their daily lives. And that's our hope there, is that we would do that. I don't say all of these to kind of just share, hey, this is what we're doing. I hope that in our teenagers stepping up and doing something, that we can inspire you guys to do something as well. We've done our 4 projects, but what would it look like if we all did something more consistently? What would it look like if you found the one thing that tugs at you about this community? Guys, we have a drug problem bad. I don't need to be the one to tell you that. And that tugs at some of you. That tugs at some of you hard, because that's where your passion is. And so you take that passion, you see that need, and you fill it. Or if I could say it like Jesus said it at the end of the passage that I just read, freely you have received, but now freely give. You have freely received passion. You have freely received grace. You have freely received love and non-judgment. Now go and give that to the rest of the community that we live with. It has been our hope that in this service that we could give you a full force of both global and local mission, global and local ministry, what we're doing in both areas. Lola shared with you lots of encouraging stories about what's going on through NMI, and I'm super pumped about it. But I also want you guys, I want to encourage you to stay involved, get involved with local mission stuff. If you see an area that you want to step in this community, step up. Do something about it. Look for what you're passionate about and think about how you could better use that for the kingdom that Jesus so desperately wants you to experience. Let me pray for you guys. God, I just thank you for this church. This wonderful church that is so set on mission. This church that is so quick to love everyone who walks through these doors, but again, so quick to love everyone outside of our circle as well. I ask that you would be with us as we try and discover these things within us, discover these passions, discover these areas where we want to step up. I ask that you would give us the courage to do so. Give us the courage that despite all the risks, despite everything that could happen of this, that we'd be able to lead a team of people, of teenagers, of adults, of children, and go bring the message to them. We love you so much, Father. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.